Douglas advertised in its DC-9 brochure, which predicted that passengers would have just enough time for a wink and blink, but not enough for a nod on shorter trips. On April 4th, at 3:54 p.m., a Southern Airways DC-931 carrying 81 passengers and 4 crew members took off under cloudy skies and in heavy rain from Huntsville International Airport near Huntsville, Alabama, on its way to Atlanta. Sometime after 4 p.m., as it was flying over Rome, Georgia, the aircraft entered a massive thunderstorm cell, part of a larger squall line, a chain of storms that can brew up a wild and dangerous concoction of rain, hail, and lightning. Far below, to the east, in New Hope, the weather was idyllic. "It was an absolutely beautiful day," recalled Sadie, who lived with her family in a brick ranch house set back from Georgia State Route 92 spur, now Georgia State Route 381, known as the Dallas-Ackworth Highway for the two cities it connects. It was blue skies, white clouds with a slight breeze, sun shining. Just gorgeous. There wasn't much for Sadie to do before her husband, Emery, came home for supper that evening. The house was for sale, so it was already cleaned and ready to be shown, she recounted. The one-story ranch was a wonderful place to live. The kids loved it. It had a full basement and a comfortable living room with a fireplace and a picture window that looked out over a long asphalt driveway and a front yard sheltered by tall pine trees. A creek ran behind the home, separating the Burkhalters' lot from houses directly behind them. Sadie and Emery liked New Hope, too, which was small and friendly, and all their immediate neighbors. They were just sweet people, kind, caring, and loving. The Burkhalters' ranch house was the second home to be built on the deep, shady lot. The first house constructed on the sloping site had been much closer to the road, but a fire had destroyed it. The Burkhalters' home was behind the site of that first house, set back 200 yards from the two-lane highway that ran southwest to northeast through town, past the volunteer fire station and Newman's grocery on the west side, the same side where the Burkhalters' home sat. The warm spring weather had lured all 3 Burkhalter boys outside. Stanley, 14, and Steve, 12, were riding their bicycles up and down the driveway along with Tony Clayton, the son of New Hope Volunteer Fire Chief John Clayton, who lived nearby. Eddie, 2.5, was pedaling his tricycle along, trying to keep up with the older boys. The Burkhalters were a classic blended family. Sadie had adopted Stanley and Steve as infants during her first marriage. Stanley was fair, with red blonde hair he wore in an afro. Steve was Native American, with straight black hair and brown eyes. After Sadie had divorced and remarried, she and Emery had Eddie, a tow-headed boy with green eyes. "Growing up with 2 older brothers who were adopted was just normal, really," recalled Eddie. "I didn't know any different, and neither did they." The age gap between the 2 older boys and Eddie created a disconnect, he said, but we were still brothers, still fought with one another. I got pretty good at driving them crazy. As he got a bit older, he said, I'd take turns sharing rooms with them. Stanley would read the Bible under a lamp on his side of the bed until after midnight most nights. Steve had a waterbed that he kept way too hot for me, and he listened to Lionel Richie on his tape deck. I could only stand so much of either situation, so I'd bounce from one room to another throughout the week. For the most part, he said, we made our family work. Sadie had just put on a pot of chili for supper when the phone rang. It was Emery, who worked in Atlanta for a firm that set shipping rates for trucking companies. When he was at work, he kept his office radio tuned to a station in Huntsville so that he could get a jump on news about threatening weather coming from the west on its way toward Paulding County. By the time the weather hit Huntsville, we would get the news here before it got to the Atlanta radio stations, explained Sadie. He said, Honey, we've got some bad weather coming. You need to get the kids in. So I hung up immediately. I walked down that front porch and I called all the children. I said, Boys, you need to come on in. Steve could tell by the tone of her voice that she meant business. She said we needed to come into the house, that there was going to be some bad weather coming in, that we needed to prepare for that. None of the children protested, he said, and Tony promptly left to go back home. Spring is tornado.